right, you are back with comedian David Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. So it's late. I just had a coffee to get through this fucking podcast because I was just at a gig and there was a Melbourne comedian there. So I hung out with him for a bit and a couple other comedians, and yeah. Then I had to stop for a fucking kebab and some chips, and here I am, fucking cooked because I went back to jiu-jitsu today. Absolutely fucking wrecked. It's so good to be back though. I think this is my plan. I'm going to give it like maybe another month of consistent jits because I still haven't been consistent the last couple of months. And then I'm going to fucking enter a competition before I get my blue belt so I can fucking hopefully win. And then I'll be good. After that, I'll be happy. I'm still pretty fucking rusty. I'm forgetting all the moves that I was like nailing before I got injured. I rolled with a black belt today and I didn't get submitted, but I wasn't overly happy with my performance. I'm getting stuck in positions that I was never getting stuck in earlier. I think a little bit has to do with just fucking gassing out, but that will come. I'm fucking psyched about that. I'm actually psyched about comedy. I stayed after the gig and just hung out with a couple of comedians, Steph Broadbridge and Nick Kappa, and just talked comedy, and it was like inspiring a little bit. Because both of them fucking love comedy. They still love doing it. They both love everything about it. And I'm listening to them and I'm like, yeah, I used to feel that way about comedy as well. I'm not entirely sure what happened. And then the more I got talking to them, especially Steph, the more I started figuring it out. Because Steph's she's a really good comic. She's got some fucking great stuff. Probably the hardest working comic I've seen. She's at every single fucking gig, every single night. She's a fucking animal. But she's like, it's just not fucking happening for me in Australia. And I'm like, yeah, Australia's a problem. Being a comedian in Australia is a fucking complete dead end. She was telling me, because she's good, but she's also female, and females, especially if they're decent, get like twice the gigs as like most guys. It's just one of those things. Every bill has to have fucking like a couple of female comedians. There's less females doing comedy than there is males. So there's more spots for decent female comedians. So you can sort of rip up the rankings pretty quickly as a female and you're good. But she was like, she sort of hit the fucking limit in Australia. And there's really only like a couple of pathways to being like a comedian in Australia. Just a working comedian. That's you go on the cruise ships, you go the radio TV path, which is just like, that's hell. That is my definition of hell. Both those things are. Cruise ships, I couldn't think of anything worse except for like TV and radio in Australia. That is definitely worse. Because you have to be a certain thing to get those things in Australia. They don't want anyone pushing any boundaries. You have to fit what they want. And if you're willing to like bend to their will in every way they want you to, then eventually you can get on TV in Australia. They're the two main options. And the other option is just grinding it out on the comedy scene, which is what Steph is doing. And Steph was telling me, she's like, if you do every gig, you sort it out, you get on a good rotation, which she is already doing. She's got it fucking down. She's like, you can earn like maximum about $25,000 a year. $25,000 a year, just absolutely redlining gigs. She said that's just in Sydney. That's without touring or doing anything. But she's like, when you're doing that, you have to be churning through the material so fucking much because you can't repeat too much of the shit. And you end up working like 20 times harder. And that's the best case scenario. $25,000 a year. And she was like, she gets a few other things that boost the income, like road shows and galas and all that sort of stuff. But that's been cut out this year because there's a different booker, which is another thing. You fucking spend all your career sucking up to bookers, like gig bookers, thinking like they're the answer. They're the gatekeepers. And then finally you get in with a booker and they fucking leave. And then you got to start the fucking brown nosing again. Fuck that. So that's the ceiling. That's a very low ceiling. And that's if everything is going well. If it's not going well, then you're not fucking even getting the 25K. And then she also made another good point was she's like, Australia doesn't have like comedy nerds. Well, she actually said there's not enough comedy nerd fans in Australia to support all the different comedians. Like the good different comedians that the mainstream fucking just don't understand. She's like, there's enough mainstream comedy fans, like idiots that don't know what good comedy is, idiots that are just tricked by fucking cadence and whatever, people who don't watch or know comedy. They're easily tricked into seeing someone who sucks getting laughs and saying real mundane shit and thinking they're a really good comedian. There's enough of that crowd to support a bunch of comedians in Australia, but if you're like a little off center, if you're looking for like a niche audience, you need that comedy nerd crowd because they understand what's going on. They understand the art, but there's not a lot of them in Australia. So she's like, London's the go or the US because like you're going to get more of those people, which is actually true. And it is actually fucking very demotivating knowing that the ceiling is so low in Australia. I was telling her, I'm like, there's nothing anyone in Australia can give me that I want. Like, there's no gigs, there's nothing. I don't give a fuck. The only fucking people I give a fuck about are the listeners of the podcast or my fans or whatever. I go out, I write new material. It doesn't matter where the fuck it is. It can be a good gig, it can be a bad gig. It doesn't fucking matter. My gigs, it doesn't matter where I create the material. But the purpose of me creating material is to get good material together and then take it to the people who come to my shows, the listeners and all that sort of shit. That's the only reason. So I don't need to like pander or like brown nose or do any of that shit. It makes no difference to me whether I'm at a gala or fucking Sweeney's Hotel, which it was today. So I don't really need to go down that path, but it would definitely be better living in a country where for the amount of effort you put into the comedy, to the craft or whatever, not only that, your actual ability, like being good at the thing you're putting the energy into, it'd be nice to know that you're not limited to like $25,000 a year max. That's just doing comedy. That's not like building your own fan base and shit like that. Even Nick Capper, who's like a great fucking comedian, like really fucking great comedian, just complete oddball comedian. Like just completely different to anyone you've seen before, but he's great. And I was speaking to him tonight and he's been doing comedy forever and he's working a job as well. He's got all sorts of shit going on and he still has to work a job. He's in everywhere in the country and he still has to work a job. He's got a podcast. He's got 2 podcasts, I think, and they're both relatively successful. Plus he's doing fucking ad work on TV and he's still got to work a job. It's quite fucking depressing and there's so many fucking comedians in Australia that I reckon are starting to become like world class. If you asked me that like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I would have said there's probably none. But I reckon there's a few now. And they're just not fucking getting compensated for their abilities, which is a problem. Anyway, fucking, we got the Jenny Diaries coming out today, later on today. I had the fucking Texas Law Dog on And the Law Dog was friends with, remember a few months ago, a listener of this podcast, Shooky, Ryan Shook, he passed away. Well, Law Dog was friends with him, and me, Shooky, and Law Dog did a podcast together way back, and we were in a group chat together. So we talk a little bit about the fucking late great Ryan Shook, and then we move elegantly into conspiracy theories, and we stay there for quite a bit. So if you're interested in that, get over to the Patreon. You'll see the link at boylecomedy.com. Sign up. I'll see you there, and I'll see you the fuck later.